Few viewers realize that the calm presence guiding animals on screen is built on years of quiet responsibility. Emily Thomas became a figure of steady expertise, admired for her skill and patience. But behind the camera, there were choices few ever saw, the decisions that weighed heavily, the moments when care meant sacrifice. Early mornings, long nights, and subtle pressures shaped her in ways that didn't make the spotlight. Even success carried a hidden cost, quietly testing her resilience. How did someone so composed manage the growing demands, both public and private, without losing herself? And what truths remain tucked behind the moments the cameras didn't capture? Introduces Emily's earliest years, her love for animals, and the experiences that shaped her sense of responsibility and curiosity. Explores the foundation of who she is before public recognition. Emily Thomas grew up in a home surrounded by animals and small farms, a world that demanded both care and observation. From a young age, she learned to notice details others might miss: the subtle limp of a horse, the faint distress calls of a hen, or the small changes in an animal's behavior. Her parents encouraged curiosity, allowing her to explore and question, yet also expected responsibility in equal measure. This combination of freedom and accountability gave Emily a foundation of independence tempered by care. Friends from her early years recall her as gentle, attentive, and quietly determined, a child who listened before speaking and acted carefully rather than impulsively. As Emily moved into her teenage years, she began balancing schoolwork with increasing responsibilities on the farm. Caring for animals demanded not only time but also emotional investment, and she learned early that outcomes could be unpredictable. A treatment that failed or an animal that didn't recover left impressions that lingered, shaping her understanding of success and failure. These experiences taught her resilience, patience, and the quiet fortitude needed to handle disappointment without losing compassion. Each small setback reinforced a principle that would guide her later career. Dedication to care often comes with emotional labor that isn't always visible or recognized. By the time Emily considered professional veterinary training, she had already cultivated a sense of commitment that was firm yet thoughtful. Her decisions were informed not just by knowledge, but by empathy, a sensitivity honed through years of attentive observation and consistent responsibility. Even in simple, everyday moments, feeding animals, monitoring their health, or managing small emergencies, she practiced decision-making that balanced care with practical action. These early experiences, though private and largely unseen by the public, were shaping the professional demeanor she would later display on screen. What stands out is not only her skill, but also the emotional awareness she developed so young. Emily learned that passion for others, human or animal, requires more than enthusiasm. It requires patience, endurance, and a steady willingness to face challenges without immediate reward. Even in her early years, she understood that caring deeply could be quietly exhausting, that the weight of responsibility often came in small, cumulative doses. This foundation of skill and emotional discipline would later prepare her for the intensity of public scrutiny and the demands of being a visible figure in veterinary care. Her quiet resilience, nurtured through these formative years, became a defining trait. Explores Emily's entry into professional life, the excitement and challenges of learning, and the first sense of carrying real responsibility for both animals and people. Examines how early career experiences shaped her skills, confidence, and emotional awareness. After completing her initial education, Emily Thomas entered a world that felt simultaneously thrilling and demanding. Veterinary clinics were busy, filled with the constant rhythm of animal care, emergencies, and human expectations. Here, theory met reality. While textbooks and classes had offered guidance, the practical work of treating live animals brought unforeseen challenges. Each case required decisions that could not always be reversed. A horse with a subtle lameness, a dog suffering from an unseen illness, or a sudden injury demanded both knowledge and intuition. Emily quickly learned that her instincts were only as valuable as the discipline and observation behind them. Her early mentors played a pivotal role in shaping her professional approach. Experienced veterinarians modeled not just technical skill, but patience under pressure and emotional steadiness. Emily observed closely, absorbing lessons that textbooks could not teach: how to maintain calm during emergencies, how to communicate difficult news to anxious owners, and how to make ethical decisions without hesitation. These moments of quiet guidance helped her develop a professional identity grounded in competence and compassion. Colleagues noticed her ability to remain measured even when cases were emotionally taxing, and her reputation for careful observation began to grow. Yet the intensity of the work was not without strain. Long hours, unpredictable schedules, and the emotional labor of handling sick or injured animals introduced stress that had to be managed discreetly. Emily began to notice the subtle ways fatigue affected decision-making and learned strategies to remain alert and empathetic. Small victories, an animal recovering, a client expressing gratitude, brought a deep sense of fulfillment, but each loss left a lingering weight. She learned to carry both without letting one diminish the other, an emotional balance that required constant attention. This period also offered early insights into human behavior and the dynamics of power within professional environments. Emily observed hierarchies, unspoken rules, and the delicate balance between asserting skill and deferring to experience. Navigating these dynamics quietly, she developed confidence not only in her medical judgment, but also in her ability to interact effectively with colleagues, clients, and staff. By the end of her early training, Emily had built both a practical skill set and a subtle understanding of the professional landscape she would soon inhabit more publicly. In these formative years, she also began reflecting on the personal costs of her choices. Every decision carried weight, not only for the animals under her care, but for the humans who relied on her. She realized that responsibility could be isolating, and that emotional resilience was as essential as medical expertise. These lessons, quietly accumulated, laid the groundwork for the pressures she would face later on screen, under public scrutiny. Emily's early career shaped her not only as a veterinarian, but as a person learning to balance compassion, competence, and endurance. Examines Emily's transition from private veterinary work to public visibility, highlighting the contrast between her professional dedication and the scrutiny of being on television. Explores how her work, relationships, and personal identity adjust under observation. The moment cameras followed Emily Thomas into her daily routines marked the beginning of a very different kind of responsibility. Suddenly, her work was no longer private. Every decision, every movement, and every interaction could be observed and interpreted by thousands. The transition was subtle at first. While she continued to treat animals with the same care and attention she always had, she now had to navigate a layer of visibility that added new challenges. Emily noticed quickly that performing under observation required a certain rhythm, a balance between authenticity and awareness. She needed to maintain her calm demeanor, not just for the animals or their owners, but also for viewers who had come to expect a particular presence. On screen, she had to communicate clearly, patiently, and confidently, even on days when the work was exhausting or emotionally draining. The quiet moments of reflection she once allowed herself became rarer, replaced by the demands of pacing her energy, attending to both animals and the expectations of the production. Behind the camera, colleagues noticed her adaptability. She learned to manage simultaneous pressures: the immediate needs of animals, the expectations of their owners, and the indirect pressures of being part of a televised program. The work remained rewarding, but it was increasingly layered with subtle stresses. Emily had to remain vigilant about small details, aware that minor oversights could be amplified by the camera. Her empathy remained constant, but it now had to coexist with performance, timing, and the unspoken dynamics of a production team. This new stage also introduced insights into human behavior under public scrutiny. She observed how colleagues adjusted, how power dynamics shifted in the presence of producers and crew, and how audience perception could influence internal interactions. Emily developed strategies to maintain professionalism, navigate expectations, and protect the integrity of her work. She discovered that resilience in this environment depended on emotional intelligence, careful communication, and the quiet discipline of maintaining composure under observation. At the same time, Emily reflected on the personal adjustments she was making. Time that had once been spent in private reflection or family connection was now often devoted to the demands of filming. She quietly assessed how to maintain her own standards while meeting the expectations of viewers and the production team. Her commitment to animals remained unwavering, but she recognized that being on-screen would always require balancing authenticity with the subtle pressures of public perception. By the end of this period, Emily had become not only a skilled veterinarian, but also a professional capable of navigating visibility, performance, and the layered dynamics of public life. She had learned to integrate her expertise with poise, a skill set that required both personal reflection and adaptability. Yet the quiet question remained: how would this constant observation affect her private life, her emotional energy, and her ability to sustain the same depth of care for the animals she loved? Explores how Emily's demanding career affected her personal relationships, including family, friends, and romantic connections. Examines the emotional costs and quiet compromises made to sustain both professional and personal responsibilities. As Emily Thomas's career grew, the demands of her work began to ripple into her personal life. Friends and family noticed that she was often unavailable, called away at a moment's notice to care for an emergency, or absorbed by the weight of her responsibilities. While her presence brought comfort and reassurance to those she treated and worked alongside, it often meant that time with loved ones was reduced, reshaped, or interrupted. Emily approached this reality with care, striving to maintain relationships even when schedules made it challenging. She learned to express attention in small, meaningful ways: a brief call during a break, a thoughtful message, or careful listening when time allowed. Romantic and close friendships were particularly affected. Partners and friends sometimes struggled with her frequent absences or the intensity of her professional focus. Emily became aware that maintaining these connections required a deliberate balance, a negotiation between giving her full energy to her work and reserving space for intimacy and trust. She developed an acute sensitivity to timing, understanding when to step in and when to step back. These early lessons in boundary setting were not dramatic but quietly essential, helping her preserve relationships without compromising the quality of care she provided to animals or the expectations of the people around her. Emily's experiences also highlighted the emotional labor involved in both her professional and personal spheres. She carried the weight of responsibility for animals' well-being and the emotional expectations of clients, while also holding space for the feelings of those closest to her. Moments of guilt or worry were natural, yet she learned to manage them without letting them overwhelm her. Reflection became a tool. She considered how her choices affected others and how to adapt without sacrificing her own integrity. She recognized that professional dedication often came at the expense of personal ease, and that sustaining meaningful connections required attention, patience, and subtle compromise. She learned that being reliable for others meant sometimes prioritizing care over convenience or personal desire. These quiet lessons reinforced her understanding of responsibility, empathy, and the ongoing negotiation between public and private life. Through it all, Emily continued to refine her approach to emotional management. She discovered that genuine care could be maintained even amid distance, and that small gestures often carried more weight than grand declarations. Yet underlying this balance was a persistent tension: how to give fully to work while also giving fully to the people who mattered most. It was a tension that would continue to evolve, quietly influencing decisions, shaping relationships, and testing the resilience she had cultivated from childhood. Examines the periods of stress, fatigue, and emotional weight that accompany Emily's career. Highlights the quiet resilience required to manage professional pressure while maintaining care, compassion, and personal balance. Even someone as composed as Emily Thomas experienced moments when the cumulative weight of responsibility became tangible. The work itself, emergency calls, difficult cases, and long hours, was demanding, but the emotional labor of managing expectations added another layer. Each animal under her care carried a life, and each client expected not only expertise but reassurance. In these moments, the stakes felt both immediate and enduring. Emily began noticing subtle signs of strain, fatigue, fleeting frustration, and the quiet toll of continuous decision-making. Managing these pressures required conscious strategies. She learned to pace herself, taking short pauses where possible to regain focus, or quietly reflecting on a difficult case after it had ended. These small rituals were not dramatic or publicized, yet they were essential to maintaining her calm presence. Even in the midst of exhaustion, she understood that her composure had a direct effect on the animals and people around her. One misstep, even a minor one, could cascade into a moment of distress or a missed detail, so mindfulness became an unspoken requirement of her daily routine. The emotional strain also revealed lessons in resilience. Emily developed an acute awareness of her own limits, learning to recognize when stress might compromise judgment. This awareness was paired with subtle coping mechanisms, organizing her time carefully, leaning on trusted colleagues, and reflecting privately on both successes and setbacks. Her strength was visible to those around her, yet they also observed moments of quiet tension, her thoughtful pauses, her concentrated focus, the occasional private sigh after a particularly challenging day. These challenges were not only professional, but deeply human. Emily confronted loss, disappointment, and the constant need to make choices with consequences that could not be fully controlled. She recognized that caring deeply for others, animals and humans alike, required emotional energy that was sometimes finite. She managed these moments, balancing dedication with personal preservation. Through small adjustments, reflection, and perseverance, she continued to meet the demands of her work without losing the empathy that defined her approach. As she navigated these pressures, Emily also gained insight into the psychological nuances of her environment. She saw how colleagues coped differently, how the pace of emergencies created unspoken hierarchies, and how emotional intelligence often determined the success of both interactions and outcomes. Her ability to remain present, calm, and compassionate became an essential professional tool, reinforcing not only her credibility, but also her capacity to sustain care under stress. By the end of this stage, Emily's resilience had deepened, but the emotional strain remained an underlying tension, a quiet reminder of the cost of commitment. She had learned to manage it, but it would continue to influence choices, interactions, and the personal balance she sought. Focuses on Emily's introspection and the ways her experiences shaped her identity, her approach to veterinary care, and her understanding of balance, resilience, and personal priorities. After years of growing responsibility, Emily Thomas began carving out moments for reflection. The pace of her work, the visibility from television, and the emotional demands of caring for both animals and people had created an environment that required self-awareness. She started to consider not only what she had accomplished, but how the experiences had shaped her perspective and her approach to life. Quiet reflection became a tool, helping her assess choices, learn from challenges, and acknowledge both growth and ongoing areas for attention. These reflective moments often centered on the balance between personal well-being and professional responsibility. Emily noticed how the intensity of her work affected relationships, energy levels, and emotional presence. She considered the cumulative impact of small sacrifices, the hours away from friends and family, the missed personal events, and the quiet fatigue that sometimes followed long days of emergencies. This recognition did not bring regret but awareness. She began thinking strategically about how to sustain both her compassion and her energy, realizing that reflection was as critical to her effectiveness as any technical skill she had learned. Reflection also reinforced Emily's understanding of her professional identity. She saw that her resilience was built not only on technical skill but on emotional intelligence, the ability to maintain calm under pressure, and the quiet capacity to navigate human and animal needs simultaneously. These insights allowed her to approach challenges with a more intentional mindset, identifying patterns in both cases and interactions that she could manage more effectively. Each observation deepened her ability to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively, a skill that would support her in both private and public contexts. Personal growth, however, was not limited to professional insights. Emily recognized how her experiences had shaped her values, her priorities, and the way she approached relationships. She became more conscious of her own needs, understanding that self-care was not indulgent but essential to sustaining the level of care she offered others. She also began to see the interplay between boundaries, responsibility, and empathy, and how careful attention to these dynamics could enhance both her life and her work. By observing herself in these quieter moments, Emily gained clarity on the kind of balance she wanted to maintain moving forward. She saw the importance of preserving energy for critical moments, the value of nurturing relationships thoughtfully, and the necessity of remaining attentive to the emotional realities of her work. This period of reflection marked a turning point, highlighting both her growth and the ongoing choices that would define the next stages of her life. Explores how Emily manages her ongoing professional and personal responsibilities, emphasizing her strategies for maintaining empathy, energy, and emotional equilibrium while continuing to care deeply for animals and people. By the time Emily Thomas reached a more established stage in her career, she had developed a nuanced understanding of how to sustain compassion without losing herself in the process. The work remained demanding. Emergencies could arrive at any hour, cases were often complex, and clients relied on her expertise for outcomes that mattered deeply. Yet she had learned to pace herself, to anticipate moments of strain, and to create small routines that allowed her to maintain focus and emotional clarity. These were practical strategies, simple but effective, pausing to reflect after a challenging case, making time for a quiet moment with a recovering animal, or stepping back to process the day's events before engaging with others. Emily's approach to balance extended beyond logistics. She cultivated emotional resilience by acknowledging the weight of responsibility without letting it dominate her sense of self. She was attentive to subtle shifts in her energy and mood, recognizing when she needed support or when taking a moment alone could prevent burnout. Colleagues noticed that she moved through difficult days with a steadiness that was rare, a presence that reassured both animals and humans alike. Yet beneath this composure lay a careful negotiation, maintaining high standards of care while protecting her own well-being. Relationships continued to play a vital role in this balance. Emily made intentional choices about how to nurture connections, understanding that small gestures could maintain closeness even amid a demanding schedule. She also recognized that setting boundaries was not a limitation but a tool to preserve the quality of her care, both personally and professionally. Friends and family appreciated her attentiveness, even if moments together were sometimes brief or carefully scheduled. These conscious decisions reinforced her sense of agency, allowing her to be fully present when it mattered most. At the same time, Emily remained aware of the ongoing pressures inherent in her career. Public visibility brought its own challenges, from audience expectations to the subtle scrutiny of being on screen. She learned to navigate these pressures with discretion, letting her professional judgment guide her actions rather than external opinion. Through observation, reflection, and experience, she built a framework for managing both public perception and private responsibility, understanding that compassion and balance were not mutually exclusive, but deeply interconnected. Emily's continued growth, emphasizing how she integrates lessons from earlier stages of her life with the practical realities of daily work. She sustains empathy and attention not by denying challenges, but by managing them thoughtfully and proactively. Her capacity to maintain care, composure, and personal equilibrium reflects a deep awareness of the human and animal needs she serves, alongside the quiet acknowledgement that self-care is essential to sustaining both. Explores Emily's vision for the future, reflecting on lessons learned, ongoing challenges, and the strategies she plans to maintain both her professional dedication and personal well-being. Highlights her adaptability and forward-looking perspective. As Emily Thomas contemplates the years ahead, she carries with her the cumulative experiences of her personal and professional journey. The early days of curiosity and responsibility, the rigorous training, the public visibility, and the quiet emotional labor have all contributed to the person she has become. Looking forward, she is mindful of the lessons these experiences have taught her, the value of reflection, the importance of boundaries, and the subtle art of sustaining compassion without depletion. Emily recognizes that her work will always be demanding. Emergencies will continue to arrive unexpectedly, Cases will challenge both her skill and patience, and public attention will maintain its presence. Yet she approaches the future with strategies refined over years of observation and practice. She plans her time carefully, balancing urgent responsibilities with periods of rest and reflection. She remains attuned to her own emotional needs, understanding that her ability to provide care depends on her capacity to remain grounded and resilient. Relationships, too, are a central focus. Emily continues to cultivate meaningful connections with friends, family, and colleagues, knowing that these bonds provide not only support but perspective. She has learned that small, thoughtful gestures can maintain closeness even when her schedule is demanding. She has also learned when to step back, ensuring that her energy is invested in ways that sustain both her well-being and the quality of her work, the subtle lessons of visibility and public perception. Emily understands that her public image as a veterinarian is intertwined with her private dedication. She has learned to navigate this duality, maintaining authenticity while respecting the expectations of an audience. These insights guide her choices, helping her anticipate challenges and respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. Finally, Emily reflects on the ongoing process of growth and adaptation. She recognizes that balance, resilience, and compassion are not static achievements, but continual practices that require attention, mindfulness, and intentionality. Looking ahead, she approaches her work and her life with awareness and care, integrating the lessons of the past while remaining open to new experiences, challenges, and opportunities. Her vision is not one of perfection but of thoughtful, sustained engagement, remaining present, compassionate, and resilient in the face of both professional demands and personal responsibilities. Emily stands poised between past and future, aware of the quiet pressures that accompany her role, but also empowered by the resilience, skill, and insight she has cultivated. The story observes her not as a figure defined solely by success or visibility, but as a human being navigating responsibility, empathy, and the ongoing journey of growth.